Hi, good evening, and welcome to the May 2022 Lower Makefield Township Historical Commission. We're going to go over the agenda in just a minute, but we have a guest who's going to join us in the beginning to tell us about an event. So, John, if you can bring Ron in, that would be great.
Bringing Ron in now.
Okay.
Am I in?
Ron, are you there?
I'm here. Can you
Hi,
hear me?
Ron, it's Joe.
Hi, Joe. How are you tonight?
I'm doing well, thank you. So,
Good to see
Ron,
everybody else here too.
Ron, we know you're at your board meeting, so we'll let you do your part and get back to your meeting. Just everyone, real quick. Ron Schmid is the chairman of the Pensbury Society, and he and I had we met a couple of weeks ago because Ron wanted to extend an invitation for the historical commission to the Pensbury Spring Festival, which is coming up next weekend. So I said, well, why don't you invite them yourself, because we have our meeting this week. So Ron is on, so I'm going to turn it over to Ron now and let him tell you a little bit about Pensbury Manor, the society, and the Spring Festival.
Thank you very much, Joe. Yes, I'm here. I'm chairman of the board of the Pensbury Society. In fact, we have a board meeting this evening. And I'm sure, my guess is that some of you who have lived in this community over the years have been to Pensbury Manor at some point, perhaps when you were at school or sometime during your life. So I suspect this is not going to be brand new to you. But what might be is we are holding what we call a spring celebration. It's on May 21st at 5 o'clock. And the whole idea is to thank our society members and donors who have stayed with us during the whole COVID pandemic situation. But we're taking this occasion also to take a deeper dive into the community and to reach out to various groups that we think would have a natural synergy with Pensbury Manor, groups that care about history like yourselves. And we have never really gotten together like this. So that's how Joe and I began this conversation, and when I wanted to invite all of you to join us on May 21st. So we've been closed during the pandemic, but we kept our staff on. We kept them on through grants and contracts, a couple of PPP loans for $37,000, parks gave us some money, waste management, Pew, and others. So it enabled us to keep the staff here and to keep the name out there of Pensbury Manor in front of our constituents and clients. But we're back. I'm very pleased to say we're back. This week we had, in fact, yesterday, I was just told we had 500 children here, and it was just a great event. And we have someone new from the Trent Museum who's heading up our educational efforts, and she has now reached out, and we have 50 schools coming this year to Pensbury Manor. So why do schools come to Pensbury Manor? Well, the reason is that under the standards of education through the Commonwealth, William Penn is taught in the 3rd grade and Hannah Penn in the 6th grade. So we are a natural place for schools to come because that's what we're about. That's what we celebrate. So our brand is really educating children about life in the 17th century. But I want to stress we're a living history museum. It's not just, you don't just walk into a museum here. We have animals out there. We have 47 acres. We have the recreated home of William Penn. So education is part of our brand. The second part of the brand is history. William Penn being the first governor of Pennsylvania, and all of his values evidenced in the Charter of Privileges and which was the inspiration for the Constitution. And we celebrate that all the time. We have many volunteers here who dress up in 17th century costumes, etc. But we don't just celebrate history, but we try to contemporize history. And I want to give you an example. We have, and now it's part of our brand, a naturalization ceremony. A couple years ago, before the pandemic, we had 41 people from 21 countries become citizens here. several years ago, we had an extraordinary event. We invited all the living governors to come to Pensbury Manor and talk about their experiences, but their experiences in light of Penn's values and thoughts, and how they saw that during their administrations, both Democrats and Republicans. And it was a wonderful event. So, and the third thing is we have Charter Day in March, which is when we originally got the charter. So the idea is not only to celebrate history of the 17th century, but to contemporize it for all of our constituents. So I'd like to, get you folks to come. I would like to invite all of you to come. We're going to have some food, some drink, some music, brief speeches on that day, and special tours of the facility. It won't be open to the public. It's just going to be open to our members, our donors, and other people we are inviting, like yourself. If you can't make the event, that's fine. Let me know, and I'd be happy. And our site administrator, Doug Miller, who is employed by the Commonwealth, we'd be happy to take you on a tour here. If you'd like to hold one of your meetings at Pensbury Manor, we'd be happy to host you here. And on that time, we could give you a tour of the grounds and you could see what this is all about. So with that, I'll close. You do have an invitation. I hope you can come. It'll be a nice afternoon and early evening. You can meet some folks. If not, we'd be happy to continue this relationship by having you come out here and talk more about William Penn and some of the things we do here. So with that, I take any questions, Joe, from anybody.
Okay. I did send out, Ron has sent me an invitation, electronic invitation and PDF. I sent that out, correct? You got it? Yeah, okay. Okay, good. So that has all the details on it. Any questions for Ron about Pensbury Manor, the society, or the event? No, I think, Ron, you did a great job. You covered all the important details.
Well, I'm delighted to see all you folks, and I hope you can make it. If you can't, please give me a holler and we'll set something up and we can make something happen between both of our organizations.
Okay. We'll let you get back to your board meeting, Ron.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
All right, take care. Bye. That was good. Next, there's also an open house coming up at Bolton Mansion. I've been talking to the president of the society, Tracy. I'll forward that over to you. She just sent me some information about that too. Again, it seems like now with COVID, things are opening up a little bit and they're starting to have these events again. And a lot of historical societies are becoming active. So that's a good thing. Let's dive into the agenda. The first thing on the agenda for today is the approval of the minutes from April. Did anybody have comments or changes to the minutes? Helen? We can't hear you, Helen.
Sorry, I have to unmute.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't get to reading them till this afternoon, and there are a couple of typos. First of all, page 4.
Okay.
Down at the bottom, Pensbury Manor is not demolished.
Okay.
What I meant, or, basically, I think the minutes were recorded, so it was kind of like whatever it sounded like. So I think I said that the original Pensbury Manor was demolished, and what we have there is a reproduction, which is true.
Right.
Okay, and then the spelling of Huff is not Hoff, it's H-O-U-G-H.
Yeah, Chris and I were going back and forth on that.
Same paragraph. Page
What was
5,
that? What page was that?
4.
4. Okay. Okay. What was the next?
Under a comment on page 5 by Dan, I think you meant township manager, and it came out as retention manager.
All right.
Do you see that one?
I'm just taking notes.
Oh, okay. And then page 6, somehow that whole conversation about the Wiener property got messed up. The Wieners never gave anybody permission to go on their property, so there was no action taken. We were asked by groups to if they could hold a cleanup. And we, and the people who had wanted to pull down the vines. But we never got any permission. We explained to them that it wasn't owned by the township and it was private property. And so there was never any action taken. In fact, we discouraged them from doing it because we were worried about the fact that stones had been disappearing. So that
Right.
part was true, that stones had been stolen already. So we really didn't want it to be too apparent to people. But yeah, it kind of looked like if I were a Wiener lawyer, I'd be calling somebody. And that was on page 6. And then on page 7, there was something about a tax valuation, and it came out as something else. It should have been a tax. I didn't make a good enough note for it, sorry. But anyway, it's something, I think it was about the Wieners again. The property was valued at $400. No, that was a tax valuation, which is a fraction, a mill of what the actual value of property is.
And what page is that on?
Tax valuation was $400. It's an
Okay, the value, you said of the value,
It's an empty piece.
the tax valuation.
Okay, that was it.
Where was the other comment on the Wiener property you were talking about?
Dan's comment was on page 5, bottom of page 5, and the Wiener comment on the discussion about the Wiener property, the octagonal schoolhouse.
And what did, I'm just looking.
That
for
was
it.
page 6.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. Okay.
And then on the top of page 7, I guess it is it was added that the valuation was $400. That's probably not what the Wieners are going to accept.
Right. All right. I got that here.
The only thing that legally could go there, I mean, in terms of it's in the road right of ways on every side, so it's kind of a useless piece of property. But I think they might be able to get basically if they went for some variances, they might be able to get a sign put in there, but that's about all that could go on that site.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the comment from Dan on top of page 7, you mean the one that starts with the Board of Supervisors meeting?
That what?
I'm looking for that comment from Dan that you were talking about. You said
Yeah, he was there as a supervisor.
I know,
So
but what's the
it
comment?
was down on the bottom, and it was something about, we were asking about the ad hoc groups discussion of what would happen next with, or maybe it was our discussion on what would happen next with the dendrochronology. And he said, Dan said something about it next has to go through the township manager. And somehow it came out as retention manager.
Right. I found that one, but what I didn't find was the other one about the Wiener property you were commenting on.
The Huff one was on page 4.
No, the one about the Wiener property. You said
About the
that
what?
the Wiener property, you
Oh
commented.
yeah, that's page 7 and 6.
And Dan's comment there around the one that says starts with the Board of Supervisors meeting, the Regency folks were looking, that comment there?
No, it was after that. Oh, I guess it wasn't. It was as part of Dan's comment because he was talking about the Regency.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it ended up with this little sentences at the end that said, I said something about that we had a group come in and it wanted to.
All right, I'll see if I can find it. Yeah.
Okay, it sounded like we were ordering people to take down the vines and
All right.
and
Yeah, I'll look
clearing it. And
Okay.
no, we never authorized anybody to touch that property.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just not seeing it right now. I'll look through it.
Okay, sorry, other than that, I'll be happy to make a movement to pass the minutes as amended.
So there's a movement to pass the minutes as amended. Do I hear a second? Tom, all in favor? Any opposed? All right, we're good. Thank you. Thank you, Helen.
Sorry.
So I started to collect here under the minutes also these action items that we have. And I also pulled over the action items, Helen, from the other work group that we have with Chris, just so we had a place where we can kind of start keeping track of all the things that we're working on. I know that A and B, the first two, we're going to be discussing this evening. And then, some of the other ones, I guess, are still being worked on. I know Chris said that he will have an update with regards to the archive project when we speak in June. The one I wanted to make sure that we weren't going to be late on is we had an action item to develop funding priorities for historic preservation for this year and next. I do know that the Board of Supervisors, I think, has set aside 2 special meetings to talk about how to spend the sewer funds. I think one is at the end of May, one is at the end of June. Maybe if Dan joins later on, we can kind of circle back to that, because I wanted to know if there's input he needs from the commission before those meetings. Okay. If not, I'll send Dan an email and ask him directly. All right. So new business. 2 items. So first of all, the spring celebration at Pensbury Manor, Ron already addressed that. The second was something that was announced in the Pennsylvania Historic Preservation Office newsletter that I had read. And I just copied the text and put it verbatim in here, what they had said. But they're doing a survey of historic places. And this is at least the second year of the survey, and next year is the last year. But they're reaching out to Bucks County now and asking for us to be, if there's places that we want to include it on this survey, historic places, then now would be the time to submit them so that they could begin to have their surveyors come out then and collect information about that. So I just wanted to, talk to the group real quick and see if there's anything that comes to mind outside of, Slate Hill Cemetery, for example, which is already on the National Register. But is there anything else that, comes to mind that we should make sure that we draw to their attention?
Octagonal Schoolhouse.
Okay. Did you catch the article about the Octagonal Schoolhouse in Warminster that was in the Bucks County paper last week? If not, I'll forward it around.
No, that, and it has relevance for the abolitionist movement as well.
Okay.
As they held moonlight meetings at the Octagonal Schoolhouse. That's amazing.
I know, Helen, there's a number of other cemeteries in Lower Makefield besides.
Well, unfortunately, another is a graveyard, and that's the Quarry Road graveyard,
Right.
because that has an early Presbyterian minister whose name's escaping me. It might be Miller, I can't remember, or Martin. I guess it's Martin with an E. Who I've been doing some research on him, and he may have been one of the Presbyterian ministers ordained by William Tennant at the Neshaminy Law College.
Mm-hmm.
And he did marry a Slack, John Slack's daughter, Elizabeth. So that's his wife, who's got the other marble slab in that cemetery. But apparently his circuit was between here and Hopewell, New Jersey, and he is credited as being one of the 5 Presbyterian ministers who, after Tennant died, moved the new Presbyterian seminary to Princeton.
Okay.
So he's technically one of the founders of Princeton University, which is really kind of interesting that they don't seem to know where he is. So
Right.
I think we do.
Okay. Anything else that comes to mind?
Well, the canal and the rebuilding of locks on the canal is also something that is part of national history.
The canal's already on the National Register, right?
Yeah, and it's also already on it. Also, the bridge, the railroad bridge, is on the National Register of engineering structures. There's a separate
Right.
register for constructed bridges and roads, and it's on that. So, and I don't think that's, talked up enough. It's quite an interesting structure because it's pretty early. It's like 1911.
Yes.
They were experimenting with concrete at that point and poured concrete. So
Right.
God knows. I mean, it would be interesting. The Dan Grenier is calling me. Let me take this,
Okay.
I guess. Hi, Dan. This is Helen. Okay. Yes. Okay. Good, Grant. Bye. He's coming in.
Okay.
That was
Okay,
first. There he is.
Hey, Dan, how are you?
This probably sums it up right there. Doing well. Sorry, I was sitting there in the lobby for a while.
Okay. We are just on the second item on new business on the agenda. The message that went out from the PA State Historical Preservation Office, and we've been talking about what submissions that we should make so they come out and survey. And Helen already recommended the remains of the octagonal schoolhouse and then the Quarry Road graveyard.
Now, the only issue with the octagonal school, the octagonal schoolhouse, that's on private property. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the only, and as an aside, I did speak with Mr. Majewski about, well, first of all, Joe, thank you for getting me the contact info. And Mr. Majewski has been in contact with the owner about a couple different things, including what we talked about. So more to come on that, I think. We'll see. We just want to make sure that if we're from a access perspective, since it's private, if they're going to do any, what am I thinking? If they're going to do any surveys or whatnot, they got to make sure they have access.
Well, I think Steve Sanasiero was on that years ago. Actually, the first time he ran for the state rep, and he's aware of it. And I know he also flagged it so that they actually moved that turning lane from Oxford Valley Road to the south. They actually took off land from that corner so that that whole thing would not take out the octagonal schoolhouse. So he's very aware it's there, and has always been part of the Board of Supervisors' intention to try to include it. And now it's, I think, the critical time to get it done.
I don't. Yeah.
Go ahead.
All I was going to tell you, Helen, is I believe the owners have been in touch with the township. And I don't want to misspeak here. There's some easement issues there too, related to, I believe, the sewer system that are in the general vicinity that the township has to work out with the landowner. I don't know that they broached the subject of, potential ownership issue, future township ownership of the property as a potential option, but they are actively speaking about the property.
Well, I was talking about the historic impact on the state because they're trying to document sites, and that one just recently, just in the last year or two, in doing research on the abolitionist movement in Lower Makefield, we were very early, like 17 or 1830s, that we were getting involved in the abolitionist movement. And one of the sites that is clearly linked to that is the octagonal schoolhouse. That's where they had midnight meetings for the people that didn't want to be very public about supporting abolitionist ways, which is very interesting. I don't think any of the original AME churches are still in existence. So that would be
Right.
That and the Slate Hill Cemetery are the only two places that really have impact on that history.
From a documentation perspective, Joe, or Helen for that matter, I was curious about, Oxford Valley when it was moved from old Oxford Valley to its current alignment, and it's a PennDOT road. So whenever PennDOT would have did that, they should have done Section 106 studies, which at that area should have included the octagonal schoolhouse. So I believe he was going to check what is the PA Share website, because the township does have access to that data to see if there's any reports available specific to that intersection that would have discussed the octagonal schoolhouse, to give us a little more.
I know
it came up
it came up at public meeting, so I know that was definitely talked about.
And whenever they do a project on a state road, even if it's a bridge replacement on something that's an older bridge, they have to document everything.
Right.
This would have been 80s or 90s, so it was still within the time when all that work would have been required. It's just he didn't have it handy to share it. But if he pulls that up, I'll ask him to share it with this group.
That'd be great. Because I looked in PA Share and I did not see it there, but I'm not an expert on PA Share. There's several different levels or categories of pieces there.
He gets full access as a township government official.
Right.
So I get certain access for my level of use, both privately and professionally and as a public as a resident. But I think he even has a higher level of access than I do.
Different level of accounts. So, okay. And this is one of the things that the state is doing with this survey is putting these things into PA Share. So if we have things that we want in PA Share that aren't there now's the chance for us to put them on the list of places they will survey,
Yep.
Anything else?
Do we want to bring up the first planned community in certainly this section of Pennsylvania? I'm not sure how old planning processes were, and whether there are any for Harrisburg or some of the cities that are further west. But it was interesting to me to find out that the first plan in the Bucks County Plan Book was the area around Crown.
Is that Shell Garden, right?
Crown Morrisville, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would put it on there, right? I mean, most they can do is look at it and say, no, we're not going to survey it, So, I mean, I do talk about local building styles and traditions, and that could fit under there,
Yeah. I think property owners would be really happy to know that there is something extra about being a part of that region.
Anything else? Anything else from an industrial point of view that is still around? I mean, anything in Edgewood would already be on the National Register. So that would. Nothing else that we're driving past. Okay. If you think of it, send it over to me. What I'll do is I will get onto the Survey Monkey that they have and start, putting some of these places in. I may have to come back to you for some additional information, Helen. I did look one time. They're not asking for very much, but they may ask for some justification as to why. So, okay.
Yeah, I think possibly George Nakashima buildings in the township might also qualify. I think Nakashima is enough of a national brand that would qualify. I don't know of any others that have specific architects assigned to them. But there may be some in the 19th century that I don't know about. So.
Right. Okay. Okay. Let's go on to ongoing business. And there were a couple of items. Oh, before we do that, I wanted to circle back, Dan. We did have a question. We were reviewing our action items. And one of the action items we have on our list is a request from you around developing funding priorities for historic preservation for 2022 and 2023. And if I recall correctly, the Board of Supervisors has scheduled 2 meetings, I think one in May, one in June, to discuss how to how to go forward with the sewer proceeds. Do you need anything from us for those meetings?
That's a great question. It wouldn't hurt to add data to the conversation or add some more information in the conversation. If there are, obviously the ad hoc committees talked about items related to this group, but that's not by no means comprehensive, right?
Right.
So if there are other items that require funding that are not in the budget, maybe have not been discussed, why not?
Right.
I don't see why not. And just so a little background on those meetings, and I missed the last meeting, but excuse me, trying to get. I swear I'm not sick. I just get a tickle in my throat. I'm trying to get rid of from being sick for a couple of weeks. It's been a rough one. Where the idea of the meetings, the first meeting, just so everyone knows, is the day after Memorial Day. It's going to be a busy week. We get Memorial Day, then one of these special meetings, then a supervisor meeting the next day. That's, I think, the 31st-ish. And then the next meeting, I believe, is on June 9th. So we're going to have a couple back-to-back weeks with a couple long nights, I think. But those meetings are designed, one, to discuss. I think the board is fairly unanimous in terms of setting up some sort of, I'll oversimplify it, but some sort of trust fund to protect at least the majority, if not all of the funds over the long term, rather than people going and trying to spend money on special projects that they want to get done. I doesn't mean that'll happen in full, but that's, I think, the language everyone's talking about. So these could be very brief meetings where we just say, look, we're going to set up this some sort of fund that we put in, low interest return, but protects it, and we can only use it if, depending on how we set it up, if it takes a vote, a super majority, or some other process to release funds for something, or we just use the interest to add that to the budget, something like that, and just keep the principal in a trust, sort of like like an endowment almost. I don't know, but that seems to be where the board's going generally. But you never know if someone will say, hey, let's spend $4 million building something that someone really wants to build, and they get a majority of the votes to do it, and that's what they choose to do and put the balance in. I don't know. I have no idea. So if there's a laundry list of items that this group thinks would like to see funded, one, it's good to have it just for the annual budget process that comes up quicker than you might think. Usually, it sneaks up on you pretty quickly. And then two, if there are special projects that aren't often contemplated in the budget, and may be more appropriate for some special funding, let's say through the sewer funds, let's get it out there. So I think of it both ways. So long story short, absolutely get a list together if there's stuff out there that you think needs to be funded.
Okay, Helen.
2 years ago, we discussed, actually in a meeting with Greg and Jim Majewski down at Slate Hill, rebuilding the wall because it's spalling and it's pretty horrible, especially against the Pico side and back. So that's something that I had hoped was put in the budget then, but doesn't seem to have gone in. Also, there apparently, I don't know if Victor remembers this, but there used to be a wall on the front along Quarry Road, at least a low, like a 1 foot wall around the Quarry Hill graveyard, and that should certainly be rebuilt. I think it was taken out in between Greg and the previous road manager or buildings manager. It's the guy who did the YMCA in the falls. It came out in his tenure. And I'm not sure, why it was taken out. I remember complaining at the time, and then I was told, oh no, there wasn't anything there. It's like, Yeah, there was, you know.
It was
so-
township property?
Yeah, it's not. I think Ralph Thompson shamed the Presbyterian Church over in Newtown to buying it back from the Vietnamese person who had bought it at a tax sale, and it shouldn't have gone to tax sale, but it did, and so they paid for the taxes. And the last time, I'm a little leery to even contact them because the last time they came in, they wanted to move all the graves to Newtown, and since we have that guy there, I don't think we should let him go. I think we should keep him where he is. And because he is on slack land. And yeah, so, the question is who owns it? I don't know. I think the Presbyterians do.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just interesting because I think our road crew took out that wall, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I hear you. That's why I asked who owns it, if that's something they could have, would have, should have done. Or
Yeah,
should, you know
it's
what I
one
mean?
of those things, Dan. I'm sorry. But that's that. And then obviously at Octagonal Schoolhouse, some kind of protection needs to be put in there. That should be in a
Well,
budget.
as kind of how we should interpret the area. We could have a, kind of a planning study done in terms of appropriate interpretation of that area. I mean, right now it's just a bunch of rocks, right? So what are we going to put there? How would we, bring people there and what would we tell them about it once they were there?
And we also don't own it at the moment, so
That's a problem.
that's
All right,
minor
so
issue there.
that
Details.
might have to be a fundraising project, and we get permission from them to put it up with an Eagle project or something. But at least if it's on the radar.
No,
that-
it's always, like you said, at minimum, it's worth having on the radar.
Yeah.
As if it becomes an opportunity to move on something, we know it. Sort of like the open space plan that's
Right.
now over a decade old, but still we have at least a list of
Yeah.
items.
Right.
Um,
I had some items, Helen, I think you and I had discussed some grant topics back at the beginning of the year. So what I can do is put them into an email and send them around to the group and see if they want to add anything to that. And then when we have a final list, I'll forward it on to Dan.
Perfect.
Okay.
And then you all are aware, we've had 2 recent resignations announced. The township manager's leaving at the end of June. And then the public works director is leaving, I think, mid-June, both going to different townships. So some of these items may end up having to, don't forget about them, but we may end up having to coordinate with new staff once they're
Right.
those positions are filled.
Okay. All right, let's go on to the ongoing business. So there was a latest proposal for the development in Edgewood Village, or another proposal. What happened to the hard meeting the other night, Helen? I was dialing in. I wanted to hear what they had to say about the proposal, and they canceled the meeting.
They only have meeting. I'm the liaison of that too. They only have meetings for that one, really, if they have an agenda that they have to review.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they're a by ordinance type of, they're set up by regulation to review specific things that they have jurisdiction over in the village. So if there's nothing for them if there's no
I thought they would
proposals
have
up there.
discussed this proposal, though. That's why I was.
Well, I don't think it was put on their agenda to do it.
Right.
I'm not sure if they're gonna, this next version, I don't know if anyone's seen the latest post after the last hard meeting that it was discussed, the same proposal that was presented to you all.
Yeah.
The developer made some changes. From what I recall,
Yeah. I
added
think-
the sidewalk back in, they added some porches, broke up the building the way Mr. Hines recommended, at least in theory. Still some more, I think they're still at 14 dwelling units rather than bringing it down. And I think they're still adding a unit to the back of the one house that was, oh, good.
Right here.
You have the latest?
Yeah. So this is the original one that I don't know if you can see my mouse on Zoom or not.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. So this is the point. And then this was the 6-unit building that was sitting here.
Yep.
And then this, what they did.
You have the new one?
They
Good.
split that up. So this is the point. Then directly behind that, there is 4 units and then some green space and then 2 more units. And then you can see also the porches on some of the buildings that were here, and then the sidewalk along Yardley Langhorne Road. So that was the changes that they made. Unfortunately, they didn't do anything about not taking down the Quill House, the other historic house here. It still says is to be removed and reconstructed, whatever that means.
Right. So in terms of, I was trying to get a feel for what they think their next steps are. I was just by talking to township staff.
Yeah.
And I don't know this for certain, but they could either go, they're thinking of possibly going back to Harb with this. They've shared this with Harb, but they haven't presented this to Harb, right?
Right.
So they could come back before Harb to present this again and get more comments. I think generally the feeling is that it's going in the right direction. It's just probably not there yet.
Mhm.
I don't know.
The existing building to be removed is a non-starter.
And the other issue there is adding the addition to that building too, I think.
Too large, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's a stickler, and I think potentially the overall number of dwelling units may cause a few concerns. But again, I think it's moving in the right direction
Right.
compared to
I think-
where we started. But I don't know that we're there yet. So personally, I'd like to see some presented to Harb and see what they can do about the 2 issues actually that you just mentioned, Helen.
Right.
And seeing about how many dwelling units, but they may, I'm not sure, but I'm not sure if they can, but I think they're thinking about going, next step would be to go to the zoning hearing board to get their response on this layout.
You mean after?
I'm not sure if they might go there before Harb.
Okay.
So that could be a sticking point. But personally, I like to see them go back to Harb just to work out those issues so that zoning hearing board's not put on the spot without Harb's final input.
Yeah.
It would be nice to get everyone in agreement before it goes there. But
Dan, shouldn't Joe write a memo as to what our comments were in our meeting to the zoning hearing board so they're aware as well as the Harb?
I would excuse me. I would address it to who would you address? Since it's not on the zoning hearing board agenda, a memo to Mr. Majewski, our planning director or community development director. Sorry, he got a promotion there. Because he goes to that meeting as well, so that way it's in the township's record before,
Okay.
regardless of what committee or board it goes in front of.
I mean, a letter based on this proposal, Helen, that we're looking at now. Because we wrote a previous letter on the other proposal. I mean, I guess on this proposal, my concern was, as you said, the removal of that building. And when we looked at the layouts, just the way that they were doing the design, when we looked at the elevations, the way they were doing the designs, you really couldn't distinguish the historic buildings from the non-historic buildings. And that's kind of a no-go from the Secretary of Interior. You're not supposed to you're supposed to be able to distinguish them. And I know that Steve talked a little bit about this with them in terms of maybe having different sets of windows in the historic buildings and things like that. But you just can't have all the buildings look alike, and then people have no clue as to which ones were from the 18th century and which ones are from the or 19th century and which ones are newly built. How about if I'll draft a letter and I'll send it around for comment. Okay.
Just one more comment. I think I remember when we heard the proposal, there were initially 14 units being proposed. And then they said that, well, they could drop that down to 12. But the property is only zoned for 9, if I recall. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, there's the overlay district. I think I want to say it's 12 dwelling units per acre, and they're at 3/4 of an acre total. So I believe they are still showing, I'm just counting again, but 610 up for the new buildings plus 11 there. And I thought it was 14, but I'm seeing 2 plus 1. So that to me adds up to 13 unless I might need to take off my shoes to count that high. But
They also sort of mentioned that the Ishmael house was going to be residences, plural, and that wouldn't fly either.
But both is one unit though.
It says, it doesn't really say on this, it says one unit, but it doesn't really say on that, so,
Yeah.
it's only 790 square feet. So
yeah.
can't do too much. And then and I'm sorry, Helen, I always get the names backwards, but I believe the Quill House is now 2 units plus 1 for an addition.
Right.
Yeah,
to me-
3,
So that's 3 total, right?
yeah.
There's your 14th unit, the addition.
Yeah.
Where? No, that's 13. So look, there's 10, 11, and yeah, 3 more. I got it. I got my shoes
Yeah.
off. Yep.
Yeah, I'm still wearing my slippers. I apologize.
So I didn't hear any discussion around allowing to go beyond the 9 units. Is that going to happen or not?
Well,
Well,
that's what I was mentioning a little bit ago, Tom. I think I think there's some willingness to possibly go a little above the 9. I think to some folks, 14 is pushing. I think they had 18 at one point, right? So they're trying to kind of split the difference. I think. My personal preference would be to go if I might be willing to talk a little bit above 9, but I think 14 is probably pushing it.
Personally, I think it's 9 plus the 2 that they're preserving, 11.
That's an interesting concept as well. Yeah, so they'd end up with an odd number in the new buildings. I'm not sure how they'd lay that out, but I'm open to discussion. I think 14 is still a bit of a high bar though to go to, and I don't know how the rest of the zoning hearing board feels about that, and I don't know how the board of supervisors feels about that. I think yeah.
Facebook would feel like that, but anyway.
Well, you can only. I mean, I appreciate the fact that they're listening for the most part and responding. I always like to hear this group's and Harb's responses to comments on how they respond to the comments. So I think everyone is cautiously optimistic that we're getting closer. But I think the dwelling units, the total number of units, to your point, Tom, is still a bit high, and because if it's reduced at all, that also changes what's the term that Steve used? The massing of the buildings will be just a little bit less if they do reduce it by a couple of units, which changes the feel, probably for the better from an historic perspective. So that's why I'm personally wanting to see if they can drop at least a couple of units to see how much better that could be.
Has anybody been in the Quill house recently? Do we know what that condition is?
Not inside, no. But I've been.
It's been sealed for quite some time. I've never been in personally. I think Helen Jeff Herco was in a while back, right?
Yeah, I climbed in too. It was still covered in furniture. I mean, all the belongings are there. It's a mess, and it certainly hasn't benefited from leaky roofs and leaky windows and infestation from animals. I mean, it's definitely a victim of 20 plus years of disuse and decay. But I don't think the persons that allowed that to continue should be rewarded, by having it torn down. It's going to cost money to restore it, and I'm sorry, but that's part of the price.
Yeah, I think everyone at the township level, or most of us at the township level, agree with that. Which I think is what they're still committed to up at the point. And then the stickler is how they address the Quill House, right? In terms of, I think Steve gave some good ideas in terms of how, rather than tearing it down and rebuilding it, how to reinforce and improve what's already there with some construction methods. I don't see that approach listed here, but I would love to have them come back to the Harb and talk to the Harb a little bit more about
Right.
how they can do that.
Right. I mean, I think if I recall, Steve's comments was to use at least a facade, recognizing that you may not be able to save all the four walls, but at least if you could save the front and build around from there. And that was when he made the comments about the windows and things too. So yeah, so there were comments from the Harb about what they could do there.
Yeah, and they were thoughtful comments and constructive comments. So I would like to see some more conversation around that before it goes to the zoning hearing board. But
Yeah.
I don't get to decide that.
Joe, I think our comments from the last meeting minutes would cover pretty much what we contributed to that meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I mean, from our comments point of view, nothing has changed. I mean, the massing and things like that was addressed by the Harb, right? You know, but
Yeah.
for our concerns, it's still very,
Architecture, yes.
yeah. So,
And for process, just so everyone's aware of the process, if they go to Harb, then that's kind of standard procedure that we're all used to, and they'll probably come back to you guys. And after they go to Harb, you know, the day before, and come to you the next day and give a similar presentation, you'll get to see the next round.
Yeah.
If for some reason they decide to go to the zoning hearing board, or they're allowed to go to the zoning hearing board without going to Harb again first, then that would be put on a zoning hearing board agenda. And even though we're separate boards, Board of Supervisors doesn't get to tell the zoning hearing board what to do or how to vote, but we can either participate or oppose or take no action
Right.
on a particular zoning hearing board hearing. So it would come up on a supervisor agenda for us to discuss what type of message we want to send to the zoning hearing board on whatever design they have at the time. So that would also be that would be another reason, Joe, to have a memo
Yeah.
To the township, so that the Board of Supervisors can get some understanding of this group's feelings on the matter.
Let me talk to Jim Majewski, see if I can understand the process. That was actually why I was trying to join the Harb meeting last night. Tuesday, yeah, because I thought, just as a commentator, to kind of voice our opposition or some of the issues that we have. But let me find out from Jim what the process is going to be going forward. And then we could either, if it's going to go to Harb, we can join the Harb meeting and voice our concerns there, and then write a memo. Or if it's not going to go to Harb, then we will definitely write a memo and send it off.
Yeah, and if it does, if and when it comes to the Board of Supervisors at whatever iteration of a plan it is, when it's on the board's agenda, you can also state your position there and recommend that we either take no action, we participate, which I'd be shocked if we do anything less than participate, or if they come back with something that we should oppose.
Mm-hmm.
It would be an opportunity for this group to speak as well.
Okay. All right, good. Let me get out of here.
And Joe, as a do you receive? I think you do, but I'm not positive. Do you receive the Board of Supervisor agenda before the meeting from the township?
No.
Are you on that list?
I am not on that list. I get it from social media, but I'm not on the mailing list.
There used to be a mailing list where all of the, board chairs, presidents, whatever,
Right.
used to get the supervisor agenda on the Friday before the meeting.
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure.
I'll check with Katie.
I haven't been chair for a couple of years, so I don't know if supervisors have changed that. But I used to make sure that everyone got it the Friday before, so you could keep an eye out for things.
All right, I'll check with Katie on that. Next topic on our agenda was an update on the proposal for the Dendrochronology project at Patterson Farm. So Helen, I know that you've been actively working on this, so you want.
Actually, I sent a copy to Tom this afternoon. I'm not sure whether he got it or not. I did work on it, and we did have a meeting actually with the dendrochronologist on Friday. And I have good news and I have bad news. So which do you want first?
Was Mr. Majewski at that meeting, Helen?
Yes, he was. He
Okay,
came as well.
He told me he attended me. I wasn't sure if it was the same one or not. Good.
Yeah, so I'm not very happy, but he's probably a little more happier. So I'll share this with you. This is the report I sent to Tom. I hope there aren't any massive typos. Tom, if you would read it and make sure there aren't any massive typos before I send it to Joe to include in his minutes. But so the site analysis and preliminary assessment was done on May 6th by Mike Cuba, accompanied by Jim Majewski and Helen Hines. 4 buildings were examined: the Satterthwaite House, the Carriage House, the barn at Satterthwaite, and the stone cabin identified as the John Tuncliffe House, occupied by Colleen Tara. Search was focused for appropriate timbers that may warrant attempted dendrochronology. So this was a preliminary to the preliminary actual taking. So we wanted to get him down to kind of pick his brain as to what was there and what he thought would actually test. Because I don't want to spend any township money on something that is not going to be successful, or at least give us some information that we don't have. So the thorough surface examination of Satterthwaite structure without further demolition of surfaces, in other words, without pulling off plaster and lath, did not find any wood eligible for dendrochronology. 0. So that was very disappointing for me. I have to admit, I'm really kind of teary about it, but that's what it is. That's the facts. Mr. Cuba believes all the visible wood is post 1820s felling date and is mostly hemlock harvested from the Poconos. And he was absolutely fascinating because he found things he called raft poles to demonstrate how the logs were brought down from the Poconos, probably through the canal, to a sawmill and sawed and then shipped down the canal, or done here in Yardley and then sold to build this local house that is currently on top of the foundation. He thought the foundation looked old. We pointed out the rib pointing, and he said it could be that something was here before this and we just don't know, or it could be somewhere else. But he said, don't waste your money. It's not worth doing the dendrochronology. And I appreciate that he said that, because I certainly don't want to waste money on things that are not going to be valid or valuable in any way to help with the National Register nomination. We did not get into that last space with the floor that doesn't have a cellar under it. So that is going to have to wait until there's some demolition of that section of the house. And at that point, we could obviously call him back, and especially if we find some oak timbers, now I know what he's looking for. It'll be a lot easier. But I got a whole lesson in timber framing. He was amazing. I think Jim did too. He was absolutely amazing. All right. Okay. While the attic space of the carriage house on the carriage house outbuilding, which is the second one from the Satterthwaite house, was inaccessible. Apparently, the township maintenance person has put screws with really crazy heads on them, because they aren't just straight screws or anyway. So you can't get anything open. So we could not get in. It was inaccessible to Jim in the construction method. But he was The construction method and wood, he identified as local oak and tulip poplar, and it, to Mr. Cuba, predated all wood found in the house. Okay, so although there was some powder post beetle infestation, Mr. Cuba judged it eligible for an accurate dendrochronology dating. The large barn was also inaccessible, but he was able to look through the doors and appeared to be similar in construction and date to the, he was very fascinated by that carriage house barn that the ad hoc committee wants to tear down. He said it's got, special framing that is pre-1800s, and, he was just very interested. Finally, we examined the joist beams in the Tunkley cabin, and here we had some disagreement about the age of the cabin.
Right.
He asked me about corner fireplaces, and I mentioned the fact that I had seen this drawing at some point from William Penn, supposedly, that had identified early cabins. And he wanted me to document that. So I have spent a couple days actually finding where I said seen that, which had to be back in the 80s. And there actually is a pamphlet written by William Penn that advises settlers on what to bring with them and how to settle in Pennsylvania. But I can't put my finger on it. I can't get it. So anyway, we examined the joist beams in the Tunkley cabin, and here the powder post beetle damage was considerable. And Mr. Cuba was unsure. So he was very, we're looking at this, we were looking at it with little flashlights, so it was very difficult to get a lot of light on it. But he was very unsure whether or not he could pull samples that might date. The attic window, which would not survive a penetration attempt, he was going to try to raise as the double hung attic window above that section of the house. And he felt that he was, he would damage the window if he tried to shove it up. And since it was pouring rain, we were standing there in the pouring rain, and Colleen had returned at that point, and she certainly didn't want the window open and then water getting into the attic. We determined that if he comes back to do the basement beams, which he thinks are worth doing, then we will have someone like Jeff Herco on site to repair the window and replace it as soon as. But what he wants to see are the attic timbers, because if the attic timbers are the same age as the timbers below, they may be worth dating as well. So that is how we kind of left it. He did mention that if he starts to do the timbers in the basement of the Tunkley cabin, and he says, what happens when you do the powder post beetle drilling? The bore hits a nest of powder post beetle infestation, and it literally just blows up. You get a puff, and there's no possible wood to date. So he said if he, in doing that, had that happen more than twice, he would call it off and say, stop right there, we're not doing any more. So at this time, I think we would like to proceed with the cabin site and the wagon shed site with a contract for no more than $5,000 for Mr. Cuba's services and the lab fees at the township's cost. All right, that said, I got a request from the DAR, the Daughters of the American Revolution, coming to the rescue. Not as a member of the Historic Commission, but as a member of the Patterson Farm Preservation Group. They were asking me about how they could help out on the Patterson farm, and they wanted to give money to a 501c3 that worked with the township to preserve the Patterson farm. So my little evil brain went to work and said, well, why don't we see if we could get them to help pay for this and not charge the township and make it so high that they would have to go out for multiple bids. So at this point, I would suggest we make that recommendation to the township. I'm not sure whom to make it to. Do we make it to the Board of Supervisors, or do we make it to the township manager? You had asked me if there's anything in the budget. There doesn't seem to be anything in the budget for this year. So Dan, I'm going to rely on you for I will be happy to write a proposal and take it to Mr. Ferguson, if that's who you deem, or Jim. I mean, Jim was there, and he said that would be the next step to get permission to get Mr. Cuba to come back. And then I'll write the letter to the DAR and ask them to donate at least an equal share or something to match with township. So we do start to get a record of 501c3 and township cooperation in working on anything at the Patterson Farm, because right now, if we're going to go for public grants, that's going to be critical.
So what we need then is from the township permission to access the buildings and perform the project, right?
I'm having difficulty hearing you, Joe.
I think, Helen, what we need from the township is permission to access the buildings and perform the project, correct?
The first phase
Right.
investigation, yes, the drilling.
So Dan,
And the lab. I mean,
needs to
that whole
provide
thing
that?
goes together. The drilling and the lab goes together. And he said it's like between 1,500 and 1,700 per drill. So he was suggesting he drills probably 5 holes and gets 2 or 3 good samples out of the beans he selects. He may drill 10, but he doesn't charge you for 10. He charges you for the 3 good samples that get sent to the lab.
But who pays for the lab analysis?
That's what it's paying for. It's paying for him drilling and him sending it, getting the report back.
Okay. And that's going to come from Daughters of the American Revolution, the budget for that.
Well, the cost is going to be about $5,000. So do we want to ask them for $2,500? Do we want to ask them for the whole thing? I'm leaving it up to you guys. And they have the option to say, no, we don't want to do it on that.
I'd always say ask for the whole thing, see what they'll do.
Yeah.
That's just
Right.
Why
just
not?
me.
Yeah.
Why not? You know what I mean?
I mean, they asked you, right?
Yeah, they actually sent me an email.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Dan, how would we go about getting permission to conduct the project? Would that have to come from the new township manager?
Depends on the timing. If it's in the next month, we'd have to, I think it's pretty low cost. I'd have to.
I know the bids that
That's
you have
something
to
it
go out
needs-
to bid are over 19.
Well, it's a low number for bid, but it's still not in the budget. So it'd be something that the board would have to give the township manager direction to actually spend money on.
But if the budget's coming from Daughters of the American Revolution, then I mean,
Well, right. So access, either way, we'd either have to, regardless of what they're actually doing, we're either going to have to give the township manager direction for 2 things: 1, to spend the money, and 2, to allow it to happen.
right.
Or if we're not spending any money, even better, but we'd still have to say, hey, yes, go ahead and allow this project to go forth. So that
It's a topic
would
that
be
needs to be on the board's agenda.
I believe so. It's a relatively small number, but it's best to run it by the manager. Feel free to copy me as your liaison to get his feedback in terms of what process it would need to follow. Because even though it's a low dollar amount, I think we'd want to make sure it's clear what we're going to do.
And when do you get your packets for the next meeting? It wouldn't appear necessarily on the agenda?
Well, everything so with the Sunshine Act, and there's been some revisions there since COVID hit, where it has, if we're going to vote on something, unless it's an absolute emergency, it has to be on the agenda. I might be oversimplifying a bit, but it should be on the agenda. So the chair needs to have it on there. He does a draft agenda, I think on a Tuesday or Wednesday. He gets a draft from the manager. I don't often see the draft. I usually get it 5 minutes before everyone in the public does. That usually goes out on Friday and it has to be on. The main thing is it has to meet a public notice requirement for the following Wednesday. So usually you want to have it on the agenda by the Wednesday, a week prior to the Board of Supervisors meeting. You want to make sure it's on there. So in order to get on there, you usually want to get it there even before that, so it's not a last minute addition. And not everyone responds well to last minute additions, myself included sometimes.
Helen, I just have to mention that the email you sent to me today and the two ones prior to that, I just found in my spam folder. So sorry about that.
That's okay.
So then,
I'll let you present it if we have to talk in a meeting.
No worries.
so let's talk about next steps then for this. I guess, Ellen, I guess it's important that we get an answer from DAR, Township Managers, so we know what we're asking. So I guess that would be the first thing, is to see
Okay.
if we would make those funds available. And then once we have clarity on that, we know what we're asking the Township Manager, if we're just asking for access or asking for access and budget.
Okay.
Okay.
I will send it to you before I send it to the township manager.
Okay. Sounds good. And
And
then,
Tom and Victor. And Dan.
and then our last topic for tonight was, we had been just reviewing the work that was put together by the ad hoc property committee and putting together, for lack of a better word, just a kind of a position statement on it. Things that, we felt strongly about, or specifically things that we took issue with. And, Victor and I read through that. We created a draft document. And honestly, when I read through it, it wasn't so much with the ad hoc property committee that I had issue, as I had issue with the consultants who came in and did some of the assessments on the buildings and some of the recommendations they made with regards to moving plaster and putting on asphalt roofs and stuff like that, that are just completely inappropriate from a historical preservation perspective. So did anybody have a chance to look at those 2 pages that we sent around and have any comments on it? Tom, you did. You sent me some back comments earlier today, so. Helen?
I did look at your comments and they were spot on. I'm glad you said it and I didn't have to. Just all the National Registry required stuff for, Secretary of Interior standards and all that stuff was dead on. After the meeting with the dendrochronologist, I am more and more thinking that both of these, or all of the structures, kind of need to be handled by the individuals who are the most interested in the houses, not necessarily redone at taxpayer expense. And someone has to kind of take the ownership of that. And because for the township to do it, Jim and I had the discussion about the Davis-Bacon Act, wages, etc. It's going to be prohibitively expensive even to make it into a residential use, not alone a commercial use. Mm-hmm. And I think, where's the harm in having a group actually try to stabilize, as long as they're following the national interior standards, the structures, and have them used by either residents or a particular group like the AOY house is being used by the Artists of Yardley. That probably, I have to get down off my high horse and say that may be the most economically correct thing for us to do.
I think it's important that, one of the things we should put in there is that the ad hoc property committee recommended doing some type of a quote unquote master plan for the farm. And I do think that's a really good idea, because without knowing the intended use, right, it's hard to make recommendations on some of the buildings. And I know that we had included in there some possible usages, but I think I exchanged emails with Dennis today, because I knew that some of the things that we had put there, I wanted to check to see if the ad hoc property committee had discussed them, and they had rejected them, and Dennis gave me the reasons why. So I think what we want to do is just come back to this idea of creating some type of a master plan for Patterson Farm, and then we know what we're doing with the buildings, and that will help us to understand how to best preserve them.
Well, the biggest problem, I remembered that we had talked to the Howell Farm before, back in the late 90s, about the Patterson Farm possible conversion to the Howell Farm model. And the biggest takeaway from that whole discussion was that not only is the Howell Farm supported by the county,
Right?
but it's also supported by the state of New Jersey.
Mhm.
And we're not seeing that kind of support for the Patterson Farm or the
Right,
other houses that the township owns.
right. Yep. And
I still think it's worth talking to the organizers at Howell Farm for ideas on uses and programs. That's one of the things they do best, and they've offered to talk to us about that and let us pick their brains.
And I think it would be also helpful as much is to talk about finances with them too, to understand how much of revenue can they generate from their programs? How much are they getting from the county? How much are they getting from the state? I mean, it might be a minuscule amount from the state for all we know, but it might give us some insights into what the challenge is there.
Yeah, so we have an offer to go up there and meet with Pete any Saturday, including this Saturday. So let me know what works for you.
All right, I will. Who else is interested in going? Okay. I will. I'll let you know. I'll put some dates out there. Okay. I'll send some dates to Tom, and I'll copy you, and then people can chime in on those dates. Okay.
Sounds good.
I had mentioned there's other ideas in there as a way of generating income for like further preservation of the Patterson Farm, because it's like, I know they mentioned about like I saw the email from Dennis about like regarding that, using something like, say, like that barn, the one barn, as like a wedding venue of some sort, or like event venue. You have other issues with like regarding like, having bathrooms put in and then parking. I still think like it's still a possibility that could generate a quite substantial amount of income to further preserve the farm. That should still be looked into, at least to a degree.
Yeah, and that's why a master plan would be good, because you would look into all those possibilities, and not just at a cursory level of, hey, maybe this will work, but they would actually think through some of the, what are the renovation costs, but also what are the operational costs that need to be taken care of here. So, and I don't, Dan will probably throw that on our list of things for the Board of Supervisors to consider at this May 31st meeting, right? Because when you read through the report, there's some good suggestions, but until we really know what we want to do with it, it's hard to figure out how to go forward with any of those suggestions,
Yeah, and when it comes to the ad hoc committee and even a few other things, there's no. It was a nice presentation, but they talk about phases 1, 2, 3, or whatever they are. I don't know that we're past phase 0 yet, with respect to your comment, obviously, and then some of the other studies that need to be done just to assess what needs to be done to even, consider where we can go from here with certain buildings with long-term uses and whatnot. We got to get. There's a lot of nice stuff presented, a lot of nice ideas. No budgets, really, in my opinion. And then that first big step was not presented, and they know that was purposeful why they did that. So that's really what we need to do first before we jump 3 steps ahead or 4 steps ahead and doing a whole bunch of other stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I will make the changes that Tom sent over, or I'll make a few other changes. Again, this is a working document for us. There's nothing we need to do with it right now. It's just good before we completely lose sight of the ad hoc property committee report that we just put down a couple pages of what we saw in there that we either agreed with or disagreed with. So, Helen, other comments? No, Helen? Okay, that was all for the agenda. Any other items people have to discuss this evening?
I don't think so.
If not, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Tom makes the motion to adjourn. Second?
Second.
Okay. You good, Helen? Okay,
I'm okay with leaving.
Okay.
I'm
Very
going to
good.
touch base with Tom later and keep working on the National Register thing, but I'm kind of putting it on hold until I hear more from the
Right.
Dendro stuff.
just one check, John. Are there public comments, John? I forgot to check.
No public comment.
All right, no public comments, so I'll take the motion to adjourn in the second and wish everyone a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Have a good night.
Take care, bye.